Top facts about world population. Every year, the world's population is expanding by 83 million people. Right now, there are around 7.6 billion people in the world. Population number have been increasing like firecrackers. From 1 billion in 1800 to 2.3 billion in 1940, 3.7 billion in 1970 and 7.4 billion in 2016. And this scenario brings its own challenge for governments. Countries whose populations are declining have to think about how to support older people when there are fewer young workers to pay into government funds. Countries with a booming young population have to grapple with how to feed them and provide education and healthcare. 3 major things affect population. Fertility is the main factor, followed by mortality and then migration. World population has been rising continuously since the end of the Black Death, around the year 1350. Population began growing rapidly in the Western world during the Industrial Revolution. The most significant increase in the world's population has been since the 1950s, mainly due to medical advancements and increases in agricultural productivity. It took nearly 7 centuries for the population to double from 0.25 billion in the early 9th century to 0.5 billion in the middle of the 16th century. As the growth rate slowly climbed, the population doubling time fell but remained in the order of centuries into the first half of the 20th century. Things sped up considerably in the middle of the 20th century. Fertility rate has fallen all over the world. Since the 1960s, the global birth rate has fallen to an average of 2.5 births per woman. However, that average is made up of highly diverse figures. In Africa it's 4.7 births per woman, in Europe it's 1.6 births per woman. Population growth by country. While Western Europe's growth rates are currently close to zero, Sub-Saharan Africa's rates remain higher than 3%. That is, still higher than the peak growth rates recorded for the world at the beginning of the 1960s. Moreover, in many cases there has been divergence in growth rates. For instance, while India and Nigeria had similar growth rates in 1960, around 1.7%, they took very different paths in the following years and thus currently have populations that grow at very different rates, about 1.26% for India compared to 2.67% for Nigeria. Population growth by the level of development. The following visualization presents how the population growth rate has changed for more developed, less developed, and least developed countries, UN categorization, and how they are projected to change through 2100, UN Population Division estimates and projections from the 2015 revision. Developed countries reached the fastest growth rates longer ago and the population growth rates there have been falling for many decades. The less developed countries' growth rate peaked in the late 1960s and in the least developed countries the population growth rate peaked around 1990. But the number of births global population growth will come to an end. Population projections show that the yearly number of births will remain at around 140 million per year over the coming decades. It is then expected to slowly decline in the second half of the century. As the world population ages, the annual number of deaths is expected to continue to increase in the coming decades until it reaches a similar annual number as global births towards the end of the century. As the number of births is expected to slowly fall and the number of deaths to rise, the global population growth rate will continue to fall. This is when the world population will stop to increase in the future.